Peace family. Excuse me. Peace family. Good afternoon. So I have the pleasure of having my guest on this afternoon. And this is Mrs. Mai Vang. She is running for City Council of District 8 for Sacramento. Thank you for agreeing to come on and talk with the old girl.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ro, for just giving me the opportunity to be on Earth Mama Live, to share my story, to build with you, and to share a little bit more about my candidacy, but really just who I am, and I'm really looking forward to taking questions.
Okay.
I'll also make sure to leave my contact information, so if folks have any questions or want to reach out, they can definitely reach out to me as well. But I just want to say thank you, because I know you're super busy, and the fact that you're making time for me to even like be here on your show, I'm super appreciative of it. So thank you so much.
No, thank you for agreeing to come, because I do think one of the things I represent is a continuum, and sometimes pretty much it's the continuum where you don't belong to the old school base. I mean, you have old school values, but you have to keep clearing the way so we don't get stuck in and we don't get comfortable and complacent when we don't let other people through the door, like somebody let us through the door. So no, it is my honor. I have to ask you though, why did you choose to run for city council? Like, why? Wow. That's kind of big. Like, why would you run for city council?
I know. So a big part, the reason why I decided to run for city council was because I really want to continue my life's work of improving outcomes for students and families in South Sacramento. Just a little bit about me. I was born and raised in South Sac. I am the oldest of 16 children in my family. So I come from a huge family, and I have 6 sisters and 9 brothers.
Wow.
I know. And my mom and dad are also the oldest on their side, so I'm the oldest grandchild. But my mom, when they came here as refugees during the Vietnam War, settled in Meadowview, and my dad's family settled in Oak Park. So my mom actually went to school at Luther Burbank. So I have deep roots here in South Sacramento. So I was born and raised here. You know, I don't think my story is, you know, unique, because I think that, I mean, if you grew up in poverty, you know what it was like growing up, right? And so I grew up poor. And you know what's crazy is I actually didn't know I was poor when I was young until I actually went to school and someone called me out that I was poor. So that's a whole.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like in the 3rd grade, when it was like back in the days when you were allowed to have junk food at the school grounds. I was playing on the playground, and there was a student that was like, "Hey, if everybody brings $1 the next day, you know, I can go to the grocery store with my mom, and I can buy you guys chips or whatnot, right?" And I'm a big fan of hot Cheetos. So that night I went home and I went into my mom's purse. Lesson learned: never steal from your mom.
Okay.
I took $1 out of her purse, and the next day during recess, all the kids huddled on the playground, and everybody pulled out their dollar bill. And I pulled out my dollar bill, and there was a complete silence. And the girl goes, "That's food stamps," and she starts laughing. Right, and mind you, I was like in the 3rd grade, and I totally didn't know what was going on. Right, I just knew all these kids were laughing, and I was, you know, holding food stamps, because back in the day, now we have EBT cards, right? And for me, it was just a form of cash, right? And I didn't know that as a young kid, and I remember sitting on the playground crying. And at that moment, I knew that I was different. Like I knew, okay, so because we have food stamp, we're poor, you know. And so at a young age, I really internalized poverty, right? Like I was that good, obedient home daughter, cooked and cleaned, helped my mom and dad. But this is the reason why I believe in ethnic studies so much, because I feel like if I knew my own history when I was young, I would have internalized poverty, you know. And so at a young age, you know, I was really angry at my mom and dad, but never told them, but was very just ashamed of being poor. And I was so blessed because I went to Sac High for high school. And I had an amazing mentor, Miss Jean Crowder, who transformed my life. Yeah, she worked with me every Tuesday.
Right?
Yeah,
yes,
she worked with me. She's African American too. She worked with me every Tuesday and Thursday night with my scholarship, with my college application, and drove me home.
Wow.
Yeah, and she told me that if I was able to go to college, it would be my pathway out of poverty. Like I would be able to leave Sacramento. And so, like real talk, the only reason why I went to college at that time was not because I wanted a college degree, but it was because I wanted to leave Sacramento. I wanted to escape poverty. I didn't want to live in a house full of cockroaches. You know, I would wake up in the morning, take my siblings to school back when we used to have school buses, and I'll see condoms on the street, needles on the street, right? Like that was my childhood growing up. But it's not unique, because I feel like a lot of folks who grew up poor, that was also their reality as well, right? So at a young age, for me, I was just like, okay, I'm going to college because I want to leave Sacramento, right? And this was my one ticket. So because of her, Miss Crowder, I got this full ride scholarship to go to college, where I went to the University of San Francisco. And that was when, like, I had like a transformation, because I took my first sociology class and I read a line about the Hmong folks, and I was like, what? We were involved in the Vietnam War? Like, the U.S. recruited us to fight in the war, right? And then left our folks behind. It was the complete genocide of the Hmong folks. And, you know, in college, I just became really angry, right? Learning how to harness my fire, fighting for, like, ethnic studies and Asian American studies, and just really angry why my public education didn't teach me my own history, right? So that was really where I began my activism work. And then my parents were a little disappointed in me, because, you know, my parents are immigrants, and so all they knew was, like, become a lawyer, an engineer, or a doctor. I didn't become any of those things. I didn't end up going to medical school, because I got so interested in public health, right? Because oftentimes all we do is focus on treatment, and we never focus on prevention. I thought to myself, wow, if I can take a systems approach, you know, and basically address health issues, right, societal issue from a public health perspective, I can really create some tangible change, right? So that summer, I decided not to apply for medical school, and I applied for an amazing fellowship program called the Barbara Jordan Health Policy Scholars Program.
Okay, hold on. This was at San Francisco State?
No, so after I graduated from San Francisco, the year that I was gonna leave San Francisco, before I was gonna graduate, I applied to a summer program. And what they do is they take minority students who are graduated from college to work on health policy. And so I applied for the Barbara Jordan Health Policy Scholars Program. And what that is you probably know who Barbara Jordan is.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
So tell us, who is Barbara Jordan? Because some of us don't know who Barbara Jordan is.
Yeah, she is the first African-American woman in Congress, right? And there was this fellowship after her to really bring more minorities into policy. And so I was a Barbara Jordan scholar.
Wow.
And so mind you, when I was an undergrad, I was very because I was an Asian American Studies minor, and I was very Asian American centric focus, right? And so when I got into the Barbara Jordan Fellows program, the program was like, who do you want to intern with, right? So I was like, well, at the time, the godfather of like API politics was like Mike Honda, right? But all the Asian folks, all the Asian students went into his office, right? And so he had no more space. And then the Barbara Jordan program said, you know, we can't put you in Honda's office. There's someone else that we're going to put you with. And at that time, I was like, why? I want to be working with an API legislator, you know? And they were like, well, there's no more space, so we're going to put you with Eleanor Holmes Norton.
Wow.
Who is the district representative for District of Columbia. And I have to say that was probably one of the most transformative time of my life, because up to this point, I was so focused on Asian American issues. And when I worked in our office, it was really eye-opening to see that, like, you know, when we talk about poverty, when we talk about access to healthcare and housing, that these are all issues that all communities are dealing with. If anything, like the Black community is, they need help, right? And not only that, but I saw the disparity that exists, and really thinking like, wow, you've been so focused on Asian American issues, but it's really about finding the common struggle, because the things that we want, like access to healthcare, good education, these are all the things that communities want, all communities want, right? And so it was actually working with her through her office that I really got to see just the work that she did with the Black churches in DC around HIV/AIDS. So I did some work with her around that. And then it was actually her who said, you should think about going to UCLA. Go get your master's in public health. You know, you did really good work here. And so it was because of her I went to UCLA, got my master's in public health policy and Asian American studies, and then I came back to Sacramento.
Wow.
Yeah. And I came back to Sacramento, and it's crazy because, you know how I told you, like, the reason why I left Sacramento was because I wanted to leave Sacramento because of poverty, but it's also the reason why I came back, right? Because my parents and my family was still struggling, and wanted to come back and take care of the family. So I came back and started just working at California Forward for a nonprofit. I was a policy associate there, doing trying to improve state and local relationships as a policy associate. But then I thought to myself, like, when I went home, you know, I looked around the neighborhood and just thought to myself, like, here I am, like, I've gone to UCLA, I got 2 masters, but the community around me was still struggling, right? And it's like, I had all these skill set. I had done some labor organizing with APALA, the Asian Pacific Labor Alliance, and I thought to myself, like, this is the time where you have to really engage your community and get them involved in the political process, right? Because oftentimes decisions are made for us and never made by us, you know? And so I started an organization called HIP, Hmong Innovating Politics, to get folks engaged in the political process that was so just disconnected, right, from current electeds. And so started hit with a few colleagues. We started with like money in a shoebox underneath someone's bed, and now we're a statewide organization, right?
Wow.
So that's pretty cool. So I did that for a bit. Organizing around school closures back in 2012, 2013, and that's how I got involved in education, because we had parents that reached out to us, Hmong parents that said, hey, our schools are being closed and the district didn't let us know about it. I don't know where to send my kid. There was a lot of miscommunication, right? But we know school closures don't impact just Hmong parents. They impact, right? Like our Black families, our Latino families, our low-income white families, right? And so it was like a multi-ethnic kind of coalition really to try to stop the school closures, right? And so for that, that's always been my philosophy, right? Like, I'm Hmong at the end of the day, right? I'm Hmong, but I feel like our struggles, I mean, we have so much more in common than our differences, right? The things that we're fighting for every day are the things that I think Black and brown communities are fighting for every single day.
Right on. So, real quick, Brother Tim, I'm going to ask quick. Brother Tim wants to know, why are there no skating rinks inside of the city limits?
No skating rings?
Yeah, so because he works with young people.
Yeah.
So when we talk about skating, and it's true, because I grew up where there were skating rings as well. I mean, I went to Cal Skate, but that's county. So when I thought about that, I was like, that's the county.
Yeah. You know, that's a really good question. And I'm not going to, like, for me, I don't know why, but I will look into it. I mean, we have a lot of, when you say skating rinks, you're talking about, like, roller skating?
Roller skating.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm not sure why, but definitely will look into it. Okay. I know we used to have that Cal Skate, right? Which is now.
But that was still county.
Yeah.
That wasn't. That's why I said I started thinking about county.
I'm like, we got some folks trying to push this because we need organizing inside and outside. You know how that gets done. So, but yeah, no, I'm like taking notes too.
No worries.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. So I get that. See, my thing is, I get that we're talking about all people. I so get it.
Yeah.
But I also know there are certain groups that need. Tim, she said she's gonna look into it. He said, "Can we bring one?" I'm feeling you. We used to have a bowling alley in this area, and then that went away, and then nothing replaced it. Because that you used to go bowling.
Yeah.
But then that left, and then that was blighted for a while, and then it was a fitness place. Now it's a church. And no disrespect to anybody's religion, we don't need another church. We need something a little bit more for people that can participate in it.
So not just like recreational centers, but really things that our families and our youth can be engaged in, like bowling alleys, skating rings, attraction. Absolutely.
Like in Laguna Creek, where you could strikes. You can go bowling. You can do video games. You could do the rock climbing. You could do So they can tell a lot about the neighborhood. So with that being said, tell us what District 8 is.
Yeah, so District 8. Oh, you mean like the map?
Yeah, the map. How will we?
Oh yeah.
Think about District 8?
You're welcome. So I'm gonna close my eyes because I'm gonna walk through the map.
Okay.
But District 8 starts at Freeport, right? So it's Florin and Meadowview, right? And so you start at Freeport, and I'm starting on the west side and moving east, right? And so the neighborhoods that you'll see is, so I'm going down Meadowview from Freeport. So you have your Cabrillo, and then you have your Meadowview, right? Then you have Hampton Station, and then you also have Detroit, right? And then you have Parkway, and then you have North Laguna, and then Valley High. So those are kind of like the major neighborhoods in District 8. So it's right between Florin, everything Florin down, south of Florin, and everything up of Meadowview is District 8, right? And then it goes straight like this, and then it curves a little bit. So then I'll walk through. So it's Cabrillo, Meadowview, Hampton Station, Detroit, Parkway, Valley High, and North Laguna. So those are some of the major neighborhoods. And I live right off of Amherst and Meadowview. So where Candlewood is, I live right next to a neighborhood school. So that's where I live.
So when you said that, I thought about Meadowview, Detroit area, Valley High, North Laguna, Parkway, and you said Cabrillo, right? Okay. With that being said, when I look at all of these areas, for me growing up here in Meadowview, so I lived on both sides of Florin, but to me all of it was Meadowview, and I was growing up before they redrew the districts.
Yeah.
So anyway, because I went to Freeport Elementary, but then I also went to Gady, which is now Rosa Parks. And then I skipped Burbank because my siblings were athletes and I wasn't, so I went to McClatchy. That's all I'm story. Yeah, because I didn't want to be accused that you should be able to. So anyway, play basketball. I was like, no, I'm not that good. But my question to you with that is, Meadowview, I remember seeing the decline happen in Meadowview. We moved here in '83. And I remember we used to have a big supermarket. Now where the social service place is, that was a supermarket. And then if you went all the way down to Meadowview and 24th Street, that was a supermarket.
Yeah.
So I remember these places when we came in from Philadelphia. And it seemed like when those things went away, nothing got put back in its place. Like I don't always see industry in Meadowview. Delta Shores is not in the district.
It's in District 7.
Yeah, so if anybody bring up Delta Shores, that does not apply to Meadowview. Even in Valley High, the progression would be you start off in Meadowview, go to Valley High, and end up in Laguna Creek or Elk Grove. That was kind of how people migrated out of Meadowview at a certain time. But sometimes what I don't see is those resources coming back to this part of Meadowview. You have a lot of nonprofits. You have we can get human services, or but I don't really see like supermarkets, like a real nice shopping center in this part of Meadowview. We do have a CVS. I don't know if that was just an empty lot. I can't remember what was there before. But I don't see anything. If you became the city council for District 8, how can you change that for Meadowview in particular? I'm not talking about Valley High, because Valley High has always had resources. And matter of fact, they were considered to be middle class. So sometimes I'm not always feeling good about middle class people understanding poor people's struggle.
Yeah. So thank you so much for the question, because I think it's also a very complicated answer, right? I mean, actually, it's a simple answer: underinvestment in Meadowview. I mean, let's just be real, right? But so what I will also share is, like, during my time working at City Hall, when I look at how businesses invest, right? What they do is like so if this is like District 8, right, or this is Meadowview, right? They draw a circle around Meadowview, and they look at the disposable income, right? And so when you have a community that doesn't have low income, even though our family, they spend dollars, right? And that. Right, businesses or developers would be like, I'm not gonna invest there because they don't have that much disposable income. You know, right? And for us, I think it's two things. It's one, it's how do we increase disposable income for our families? How do we make sure that they have good quality jobs, like in Meadowview, right? Not just jobs that barely get you by, but actually have like advancement opportunities, right? That's really important, right? So that's the first piece. The second piece is also, Measure U passed, right? And there was this commitment that those dollars will go back into the neighborhoods that need it the most, right? We have to make sure we deliver on those promises, right? In District 8.
What is Measure U? Because I'm not really clear on Measure U. Because it seems like Measure U sometimes can kind of feel like a bunch of big people gonna get together and give all their friends money. So I don't really know what Measure U really
it's a renewal. It's a renewal for taxes when it was passed, right? And if you actually look at the voters that voted in Meadowview, overwhelmingly our voters in our precincts in District 8 voted to support that, because the campaign narrative or the message was that these dollars will go back into communities that need it the most, right? And now how those dollars come back, I think that's why you have a Measure U, right, committee that makes recommendation, right? I think people are still trying to figure out what inclusive economic, what does that mean, right?
That's like a cute word.
And so, but for me, it's about investing in businesses and nonprofits and organizations that are in the neighborhoods doing the work, right? Making sure that there's continual revenue for them to continue the work that they're doing, the great work that they're doing. Most oftentimes we give nonprofits, or we give folks just enough to fill, and it's really important that we invest in, the work that's already done here, uplifting their work, but also giving them capacity to be able to continue their great work, right? The other piece that I've been thinking a lot about also is like, we have so many great things that are happening in Meadowview that we don't uplift about the great things that are happening. I mean, imagine the African marketplace here. This is District 5, Jay Chenier, because it's foreign, right? But imagine if we turn it into like an art district, right? And like imagine bringing people in, because the culture, right? The things that we have here, the community assets that we have here, we need to market that. You know what I mean? Because that's our strength. And there's a reason why our businesses are barely surviving, because we have a niche. Right? I think there's a market for this kind of stuff. And so it's really important for us to uplift the great work that's already happening, because people will invest in it if you're able to brand and share that story, right? And I think that we haven't done that for Meadowview. And I, if I'm so honored to be, elected as councilwoman, one thing is, really being able to highlight Meadowview in that way, and then two, to be a fierce advocate on council for those resources, right? And that's what I plan to do.
So with that being said, you talked about economics, jobs. I know that in Meadowview, I work at Burbank, and one of the top concerns I hear my young ladies talk about is not being able to find a job. So it's not like young people aren't working. So I work with a lot of African American girls. They cannot find jobs. How are you going to help make that job issue? Like, how are you going to bring some attention to that so we can help them get jobs?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So, you know, what's really interesting is that there are folks who are doing the work, and for me, it's like oftentimes these organizations might be working in silos, right? So we got like, you know, SETA, or we have nonprofits who do the work, like, you know, the 1,000 Strong that the mayor is pushing, right? But oftentimes I feel like there's that disconnect, you know what I mean? Like, how do you connect the youth, the folks that actually really are looking for the jobs, to the right companies, to the right nonprofits and organization? Because what I do also hear is the disconnect and the mismatch, right? There are jobs out there, right? We have to make sure that we connect our young people to those opportunities, right? And then the other places, the other thing is also, it's the relationships too, right? It's like oftentimes, I mean, folks who are not Black and brown, like, they're able to get internships because of like who their mom and dad knows, right? And so sometimes in our community we may not have that network, right? And so it's also really important to make sure that we figure out where all those opportunities are, and to ensure that our youth are on the front line of getting those opportunities, right? And someone's going to have to be an advocate, whether that's pushing for businesses to, you know, open those opportunities. The 1,000 Strong, I know the mayor's trying to push this 1,000 Strong. I mean, it's had some successes, some failures, but I know he's trying to push that. But another big piece, I think, also is, as Sac City Unified School District, we talk about being career ready, right? College and career ready, but we also have to make sure that while we're preparing everyone for college, that we also ensure that there's, CTE, right? Vocational training, right? There's all these types of job opportunities that we have to make sure we expose our young people to.
So Yolanda Banks-Reed said, you say bring the community together. Does that include African Americans who are disenfranchised and removed? Will there be more jobs for the mothers and fathers? Because that's really big. Because here's the real truth.
Yeah.
A lot of other communities are doing well.
Yeah.
To be very honest, there's I mean, when I go down Stockton Boulevard, pick what kind of food you want. You know what I mean? Latinos are doing really well. So but African Americans, Black folks, we kind of struggling. And I just feel like that needs to be spoken to. I know you represent all the people, and I get all of that.
Yeah.
But I would be remiss as a Black woman in seeing a lot of the injustices. And I'm being honest, a Black man is leaving the seat that you're running for. So for me, even that's why I'm not big into just endorsing somebody because they Black. Because we had 3 Black city council members, and I don't see things getting better in the city of Sacramento for Black folks. And I'm just being very honest.
Yeah. So let me also.
How do you ensure that?
So let me also share this, and I've always shared this with. I've also shared this with my elders and the Hmong community when I have to. I think, be very honest. It's like when we uplift, and when I think about education and who's behind and who's not doing well, right? And most oftentimes those are our Black students, right?
I was looking to the camera.
Yeah. A big part of that is, what I know, that if we're able to uplift, right, the Black community, it also brings everyone else up as well. And that's so important. I remember the first time I got sworn in, and my first resolution was actually around the Black Child Legacy Campaign, to really share about the work that Miss Jackie Rose is doing in Meadowview, and the resolution really called out for us to support the work that's happening, right? Because oftentimes, in terms of, this Black infant mortality, like, our Black youth don't even make it to the classrooms, right? And so, we did a resolution to recognize the work that Miss Jackie Rose is doing, and to say, we have to continue this work. And I had someone who called me in the Hmong community and said, we worked on your campaign, and the first resolution that you're going to pass on school board is, it's for the Black community, right? Like, that was the call that I got, and I said to them, look, when I ran for school board, I ran to represent every student in every community. And, what is good for our Black community is also good for our Hmong community, right? And for me, I think that's the kind of like, I think education, I feel like for me, not even as a school board member, but as someone who's Asian American, who's Hmong, is that I have the responsibility to also call out like anti-Blackness in our community. I mean, just, right, colorism. I mean, that's real in every community, right? But I think that's very real, and I think that as as an Asian American woman, I guess some folks can call me a leader or see me as that I also have to understand the platform that I have and to call it out when I see it. So yeah, there's anti-Blackness in the API community, in the Hmong community, and I've always shared with HIP the work that we do is to really acknowledge and understand that the reason why like Hmong folks and API folks is able to have the rights that we have is because literally Black folks have put their bodies on the line to ensure that we can have those civil rights, right? And I'm indebted to that, right? Our community that came here as refugees, right? When we came here as refugees, right, about 63 or 65% Americans didn't even want us here, right? And so I think for me, I've always, that has always been like that has always guided me, right? And when I also think about the folks who've made huge impact in my life, right? Who's been by my side, who's really supported me, most oftentimes those folks were also folks who are not Hmong, right? Like the teacher that I shared with you, Miss Jean Crowder, she was an African American woman who worked with me every Tuesdays and Thursday night and dropped me off at home to make sure I finished my college applications, right? Had it not been for her, I would not be in the position I'm in today, right? And so yeah, I think, I think as a leader, as an Asian woman, as someone who's in the community, when we see it, we gotta call it out for what it is, right? And like HIP, we always say in HIP, like, what is good for, the Black community, what is good for the Latino community is good for the API community, because we're really all in this fight together. So, yeah.
Okay, so with that being said, the question is, how can American people, continue to live in a city that can't even afford where they live? So housing is definitely on the list.
Yeah.
Hold on just a minute. We have a phrase. So let's see what that's about. Hold on. That usually never happens.
Okay.
But I did see this rating, and so I thought it was something else. But maybe it ain't there. Maybe it.
Still working?
That's it, yeah. Because if it ever freezes, it usually goes right back. Hold on just a minute. I plugged it up, but see, now I'm thinking it's not even that. Okay, let's see. Hold on. Yep, we're back.
Yay, we're back.
All right. Sorry about that, family.
No worries.
So, housing.
Yeah.
Let's jump to housing.
Yeah, let's jump to housing. So that's so connected with homelessness as well.
So when I think about housing, let me just be honest with you. Now, this is to your question, dear Sister Yolanda. You said, how can American people continue to live in a city that they can't afford? And that's so true.
That's why
I look at the housing issue in three parts.
Yeah.
I look at the homeless problem.
Absolutely.
I look at affordable housing, and I look at home ownership.
Yep. Yeah.
Because we can't continue to try to put people on affordable housing when we know there's a big percentage of us who would love to own a home.
Yep.
And we got to make home ownership more affordable.
Yep.
So that people can have equity, so you're not constantly paying rent
all the time
without any equity.
Yeah.
But the homeless is definitely first on the list.
Yeah. So I think it's a multifaceted type of you need to address it holistically, right? So when we talk about housing, right, one is definitely, I think everyone can agree that we need to build more housing, right? But even as we're building in terms of supply and demand, even we're building today, we don't have enough spaces, right? So let's build more housing, right? I think, and more affordable housing, right? So that's key. But the other thing is, I think, I'm getting a call. I'm like, decline. Yeah, I'll call. I think the other piece also is ensuring that we have protection for renters, right? Because we know that rent is incredibly high and families can't even afford it anymore, right? And so it's really ensure that we actually have some caps on rent. So I'm a big supporter of rent control. That's absolutely important. But what I will also say, I think, Ro, you basically hit the nail on top, is that really talking about home ownership. Like, how do we move people from renting to becoming homeowners, right? And a big part of that is financial literacy, right? And ensuring that, like, when we talk about good credit, what does that mean? And how do we ensure that we support our families who don't understand that, right? So financial literacy is a huge piece, and making sure that our families have resources to that. But so I think that's a huge piece of that. What I will say about homelessness is, I think folks tend to think that homelessness is only a certain segment of population, but what they don't understand is that there's a spectrum of homelessness, right? We're talking about students that are going to college. We're talking about families who are living in cars. I mean, in my area in particular, as a school board member, we have about 500 students who are homeless. About 120 or so of those students are within Area 5. and we're trying our best to triage, right, support services for those families. But there are families that are literally a paycheck away from being homeless, right? And so it's not just what folks think that, like, oh, you know, homelessness is just folks that, you know, are engaged with, don't want to work or are engaged in drug use. While that is true, and we need to make sure we have, you know, the continuum of care, like there is a spectrum of the homeless community. I know that the point in time count, about 20% of those families were you know, women and children, right? And about I think it was like almost a majority of those folks that were counted were from Sacramento, right? And so those are the reality of homelessness, you know. And so that, you know, it's going to be a multi-tier approach. There's no one silver bullet that I believe will address homelessness, right? I mean, we need all hands and all options on deck, right? So we're talking about scatter housing. We're talking about transitional housing. We're talking about shelters, right? Low barriers, high barrier shelters. We're talking about tiny homes. We're talking about, we need all hands on deck, right? And all options on deck to address the issue, because we know that it actually costs more if we don't do anything now.
So we know we had our thing going on with the housing issue here in South Sacramento. What were your thoughts on that issue? Because, I mean, between you and the other candidates, I didn't really hear anybody being vocal about it. So to me, it comes right down to, I know people like to play it safe, but you got to have an opinion on it. And you worked for the city councilman now who was staunched against it.
Yeah.
In a very disrespectful way, I'm going to be honest. I can say that. I thought he was a bit disrespectful to human beings in general who were homeless. It's a way of saying, hey, people are struggling with issues being homeless, but you don't get to call them trash and stuff. You just don't get to do that.
Yeah. So what I will also say about the homeless shelter that has been passed, right, that is scheduled to be in Meadowview, is a big part of it, I mean, is that what I'm hearing from folks on the ground, community members, also they felt like it was something that was just rushed and just pushed into Meadowview, right? And that, you know, it wasn't sincere, right? That's what folks are saying on the ground, right? And so that community forum happened, right? But I think the thing you also have to understand, I believe that folks in District 8 are compassionate people, you know, and that the homeless folks are actually, they are our neighbors, and they're in our neighborhoods now. Right, and we have to do something to address this, right? Winter is coming, and we have to make sure that they have shelter. What I will also say is that I think folks, you know, I did work in Councilmember Carr's office for 4 years, and I will say, you know, I have high respect for him, right? I've known him since I was 16 years old. He was actually a teacher at Sac High, and you know, he has been one of my mentors, but you know, there are times where I have disagreed with him. So I'll give you a clear example. When I was working as his community affairs director, because I worked for him for about 4 years, there was the urban ag ordinance that was coming up for a vote. And that would basically allow people to grow fruits and vegetables and be able to sell it in front of their homes, right? And I had told Councilmember Carr that this is an awesome ordinance. This is what our communities need in terms of if we're in a food desert, whatnot. And he said, you know, no, Maya, I'm not going to vote for it because, you know, District 8 is mainly residential, and I don't want folks having tents outside or, you know, business. And I said, you know, Councilmember Carr, there are folks working in their homes right now already, right? And so I actually shared with him that I was organizing Hmong farmers to come and speak on behalf of the ordinance, right?
I remember them growing stuff right up on
and you know, it's interesting because I had a mentor who's a politician, was like, what did you do? Like, why did you organize people to come speak? Your boss said he was against it, you know? And I said, well, because I believe in this. Like, I really want this ordinance to pass, you know? And I shared with Councilmember Carr my stance on it, and he said, okay, we're going to agree to disagree, right? And so I did, you know, I had a few mentors who like lecture me saying, you don't ever do that when you work for your boss. You never go against them. But I think if I'm always honest up front to let him know, or him or she, whoever I work for, that this is where I stand, I think that's important, right? So that's an example of like a time where
I get that.
I had to organize and get people to come speak at city council while I worked in his office. So, you know, there are times where we have to agree to disagree on things. So that's.
Do you think your run for the seat will be somehow impacted that you're coming from the person who is in the seat now?
Yeah, you know, I think for me, it's really about getting out there and sharing my story of who I am. Because if people know my story and the work that I've done, the kind of coalition building that I've done, they'll see that I'm, you know, my own unique person, right? I think there are, lessons that I have learned from Councilmember Carr. And I would say this across the spectrum among, elected officials or leaders who are my mentors, where you've learned that there are things that you would do and there are things that you wouldn't do, right? But I, as the oldest 16 kids, I feel like I've always been a very independent thinker, and really just making sure that I always speak my truth no matter what, right? And I feel honored that I got the endorsement of Councilmember Carr. He is the incumbent now, but I also know, very cognizant, that in itself will not get us to the finish line. I think oftentimes people think endorsement is what makes the difference, but it doesn't in campaigns, especially in a city council race. What really wins is boots on the ground. And I feel like that's my strength, right? I will share with you, I've been interviewing, doing all these endorsements, right? Interviews with unions, with businesses, and I didn't get, there's some endorsement that I didn't get. Like, I didn't get the SAC Realtors. I didn't get the Metro Chamber, right? I've got most of the labor folks, but I didn't get some of the business folks, right? And, I think my team members were really sad about that, but I told them it's okay, we're not going to win every endorsement, but that's all right. It's, at the end of the day, it's about, the team's commitment and passion to getting our message and our vision across to voters and walking. Like, that is going to make the difference, right? And also, like, fundraising, right? Because, you need dollars to communicate your message. But I will also be very honest and frank with you, is that I've looked at city council races where there was a candidate that raised like $300,000 and another candidate that raised like 10 to 15, but because this candidate like hustled hard and walked, they won, right? So for me, that's what this campaign is about, is boots on the ground. We're gonna work hard, right, to get the message across. And it's not just, folks from the Hmong community, but I think for me, it's about having a multi-ethnic coalition, a diverse coalition of LGBT folks who, folks who are able, right, folks who are with disabilities. I mean, I'm talking about the spectrum, like Latino, African American folks, right, across the spectrum. I think it's about it's about the diversity of this community, and I plan to share that message, right?
Right on.
Yeah.
Yolanda's asking, how do we hold our electeds to their word once they are in office, and if they refuse to do what they have spoken, how do we hold them accountable?
Yeah.
That's an old age question though, but
yeah, I'm like, how you hold them accountable is that you organize and you get people to vote them out.
Okay.
Right? Like, and I think for a good elected, it's also being a good steward of community engagement, right? That means, making sure that you stay informed and stay engaged with what's happening on the ground, right? Because oftentimes, I think for me, just because you're an elected official doesn't make you, like, if you get elected the next day, it doesn't make you any smarter or anything, and what a good leader is someone who really always is on the ground so that they understand what the ground truth is about what's happening, right? When you're not on the ground, then you can get disconnected, right? But if an elected official isn't like, keeping their promise or, delivering on the needs of your community, what I would say, that's when you have to organize, right? You got to organize political power, right? Like register people to vote or vote them out. I mean, that's actually one reason why we started HIP, why I began organizing in South Sacramento, because we realized that there were folks that were making decisions for us, right? And it's never by people who understand the lived struggles on the ground, right? Mm-hmm. And so I would say, organize, register people to vote, right? Like show up and turn out, right? Like, and I always say this, like, I would love for folks in District 8 to vote for me, right? Like, I'm gonna work hard for every vote, for every Black vote, for every Latino vote, every API vote, every white vote, every vote, right? But if you don't vote for me, just make sure you vote. For me, at the end of the day, that's important for me, right? To really exercise your because there's people who put their lives on the line to make sure that we could vote, right?
So, I get that. So what is the job description of a city council? What powers do y'all really have?
Yeah,
that people are running for this city.
No, so we oversee a $1.2 billion budget. Right.
1.2 billion?
Yeah, and half of that is general fund, right? Some Measure U, and the other one's unrestricted, right? Enterprise. So you oversee 1.2. So like police, fire, garbage pickup, street, right? Like all of these things, like basic city core services, right? Like, so whenever you see illegal dumping on the street, you click on your 311 app, which all of you should if you see illegal dumping, take a photo of it. And usually they've been pretty good, like, picking up the trash, things like that, right? So basic core city services. And then basically governing the budget, but also, making sure that you're a strong voice for your own district, right? Oftentimes I think there are projects that are put into the city budget based on areas, right? You also have to make sure you know how to navigate the political system to bring resources to your communities. I think one reason why, people ask me, like, your term is done in November 2020, like, why are you running for city council? Why are you not running again for school board, right? And for me, like, I'm not leaving our schools. I'm actually running for city council to make sure we bring more resources back into our neighborhoods, right? And when I decided to run, for me, it was also important to me to have to build a strong pipeline and have someone who's a strong and fierce leader. And so when I decided to run, I also made sure that, like, there was someone that was going to be solid, who was going to run, who was going to be a strong advocate for our families. And so Mr. Chinua Rhodes, I actually endorsed him the day I came out, right? Because I told them, like, the only way I'm going to do this is we have someone solid on school board that can continue the good work. That's important to me, because oftentimes people run and they don't think about who's next in that seat, right? Mm-hmm. But Mr. Rhodes, like, he's amazing. Like, he's a father of 5. He got kids in the school district. He looks like our student. He understands the lived struggles, and I know he's going to be a strong, fierce advocate. But I also said to him, it's going to be really important for you to partner with the city, right, to get things done, right? We can't operate in silos. We got to make sure we leverage resources to make sure that we can maximize everything we can, so that we can give our students all the resources so they can reach their full potential. So that's really important to me.
Someone wants to know, when will we bring up the Urban Garden Initiative again? Good question.
Well, that ordinance already passed. So here's the issue. I think oftentimes city ordinance pass, but it's always the execution or the implementation, right? Okay. And so I think the city has to do a better job whenever we pass an ordinance to say, okay, now that this ordinance passed, here's A, B, and C. Here are things you can do, right? You know what I mean? So the fact that folks that we're talking about it now, folks don't know about it, right, is very problematic, right? And so there are things that you could do, because the urban ag ordinance did pass, right? And that there are things that you can do, you can grow, you can sell. And so oftentimes it's always that disconnect with information, right? We can pass these ordinances, but it's about the execution and the implementation, which is just as critical as the ordinance, right? So, yeah.
Okay, so question, police, that's a big one.
Yeah.
You didn't get no endorsements from the police?
No, I don't think so. I think that, yeah, but
I only ask because in some communities, particularly Meadowview area, we've had some incidences with the police.
Yeah.
How could you, as a city council member, help us to make those relationships better?
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to front. I'm not one of those people to be like, get rid of the police totally, because you do have to have law and order.
Yeah.
But how can we make the police relationship better with the citizens of the city that they're paid to protect and serve?
Yeah. So, I will try to answer this to my best ability, but I know that there are experts in the field when it comes to this, right? But I think for me, and it makes me think about just the work that I've done, at the school district, because I'm getting heat for it as well, because I've been the one that's been pretty vocal about divesting in terms of our SROs, right?
SROs are
our student resource officers, right? Right? Like, those dollars need to be going into our classrooms, to our mental health counselor, and not to police officers. Now, my colleagues may think differently, right, on this, but that's where I stand on that. Like, you really want to talk about the school to prison pipeline, this is what we're doing when we're investing in this, right? And I stand firm on that. Some of my colleagues don't agree on that, but we'll agree to disagree. But for me, I think it's at a school level and at a city level, it's really reimagining what public safety is supposed to look like, right? Like, so, whenever there's an issue, it's like, at the same time, it's like aligning efforts, right? Like, making sure that we have mental health counselors on site, right? Oftentimes, I remember when I was working for Councilmember Carr, a lot of the calls, most of the time, were DV, or domestic violence, right? And then, our officers get called out for that. But, when they get called out, like, why are they being called? Like, we need mental health, like, we need to align services, right? That's really important. So I think for me, a big part is rethinking what public safety looks like. The second piece is the Sacramento Police Commission. Whenever there is a complaint, right, public citizens are supposed to go to the commission. But if they feel like the commission doesn't have teeth, then it's kind of like, where do you go, right? And so there's been a lot of conversation about, well, what does teeth mean? What does that look like, right? Should we give the police commission, subpoena power? Should we give them investigative power, right? Some cities have been able to do it, but the city of Sacramento has not, and I think I want to, continue to explore and push that envelope, right? Because, I mean, if citizens aren't feeling like their complaints will be addressed at the police commission level, then who do they turn to? Obviously, their city council member, right? But that's the public oversight, So a big part is that. So I would say reimagining public safety, police commission, and third, also ensuring that, you know, when we're hiring police officers, that they also look like our communities, right? But, you know, I've had colleagues who have shared with me that's important to my, but that's not everything. Just because they're in uniform don't mean that they're down. So, yeah, I mean, folks have told me, so folks have shared that with me, and I hear where they're coming from. But I do think that having a diverse police force is important. Like, that's also another step, right?
Do you think it's diversity, or do you think it's proper training? Or,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I think,
or even also checks and balances for cops. It's kind of like if you have a job and if I screw up, there's a consequence for when I screw up. They don't rush to protect me. They rush to make me accountable, or I may be fired. So I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think so I'm not an expert at police, right, or whatnot, but what I will say is that from what I've seen and from the conversations that I've been in, right, a big part of it is also like, you know, has the police department, you know, utilize all of their options, right? We talk about de-escalation, right? Things like that. And if they didn't, and they resorted to, you know, just pulling the trigger, that's absolutely like problematic, right? And we have to, you know, hold folks accountable to that, you know? And so, yeah, I mean,
So one question that I do have, I talked to someone earlier, so, you know, they say Sacramento has more nonprofits next to Washington, D.C., which is the capital of the whole United States. But I guess my question is, how do we hold nonprofits accountable not to do slave wages on their employees? Because that's a problem. So we have all these nonprofits, and we have all these homeless people, or people living below the poverty line, and rents increasing. It just seemed like another way to enslave people when we basically count on nonprofits to employ people, but then they don't really have the finances to really employ people who are mostly doing social service work to help people who are poor. But really, sometimes we're kind of making the poor. Is there anything people could do about that at the city council level?
Yeah, you know, that's a really, really good question. I think it's also very complicated too, because I think for nonprofits, the reason why, and like definitely wages should be at minimum wage 15, right? That almost is like a state issue, right? But I think for nonprofits, like, you know, as I'm leaning in listening to nonprofits, like they're struggling just to get by, right? And so it seems like there's like this larger issue of like also just the lack of funding to support nonprofits, right? And they're scraping and they're doing everything they can with $1, you know? So we have to figure out how we can have a steady revenue stream to support our nonprofits, right? And so here's another thing, like so, you know, my platform is youth investment, right? And I am a strong supporter of the Kids First initiative, right? And you may have heard of it. So basically what it would do is ensure allocation of 2.5 of the general fund to youth programming, because right now less than 1% is spent on youth in our city. And I'm a big supporter, and you know what's really exciting is that it's actually young folks that's leading that cause, right? So I think for us, like finding steady revenues to support the great work that nonprofits are doing. But I will also say it's also really important to make sure we monitor organization that gets funding as well, to make sure that it's a good quality program, right? That we're aligned in terms of our outcomes, right? Because there's some amazing nonprofits out there doing really good work, and it'd be great for them to also show just the impact that they've made, right? So that we could bring more dollars in. So, you know, I think a part of that is also monitoring outcomes too.
Do you think the minimum wage, how are we doing in that area?
Hopefully we can get, I mean, I'm for the minimum. I think we got to get to 15. We're trying to get there. So absolutely. But, you know, what I will also say is that even the minimum wage is not keeping up with the cost of living. You know, and that's a whole nother, I feel like that's a whole nother conversation we can have.
I know. Another question is, I just want to throw that out there. Yolanda asks, if you were voted into office, will you allow money to be allocated for African American people to learn more about their ancestors to empower themselves? And I don't know if you have any power to do that, but I just know when I'm working with young girls in school, and I have everyone in my class, when I'm talking to the Latinos and I'm talking to people who have Asian ancestry, they're very proud. They talk about their culture, their food, their language. When I get to the black kids, the first thing they say is that they're mixed with something. But yet they don't speak any language, and nothing to do with the culture that they mix with. So to me, there is something about them not feeling proud about themselves, and that totally impacts their ability to exist amongst other ethnic groups and cultures and traditions?
No, I think, and that's a really good question because it makes me think when I was a high school student, I was part of, back then we had a nonprofit called the Hmong Women Heritage Association.
I remember them.
Which is no longer around, but they used to have Hmong Women Circle, and I used to be part of those circles that actually just talked about families and whatnot. But absolutely, I think my thing is I will also never make any commitments that I can't keep, right? But I would say that, in terms of like ensuring that there are dollars, right, to support that type of work, absolutely, I will be your champion to look for those funding. Now, I don't know where they're going to come from, right? Because, that's all political. Like, there's the Gen Fund. There's, you can go out and talk to potential funders. But I think, for me, that is a value, and I would be a champion to help you seek those funds.
Okay. Yeah. So, with that being said, another question that I do have is, how can we I'm not saying insure because you can't really insure it, but why should young people really vote for you? Because usually young people, they know more information than adults, honestly, because it's right on your phone, you know how to operate it. But when I look at some of the elections of other people who went for that young group, that certainly pushed them over the edge to win. Why should young people vote for mine?
Yeah.
What is it about you? They're going to be like, we voting for mine.
Yeah. I would say young people should vote for me because I'm going to be your advocate. I am going to be your advocate, and I'm going to fight hard for each and every one of you. I still consider myself young. Am I still young? Right?
No, you are.
I think in District A in particular, I think the largest age group, I think last time we looked at it was 24 to 35, right? And so what I would tell to the young folks is that you will have a champion. You'll have a champion at City Hall that will fight for you. And I also know that if I don't do my job, you're going to do everything possibly you can to demand that I do what I got to do to make sure that you get the resources and support you need, right? I am also the oldest of 16 children. So I'm 34, and my youngest sibling is 8 years old. So I have a lot of young people in my family, and they are always at the center of everything that I do, right? And I'm so tired of people saying, "Oh, youth are our leaders for tomorrow," right?
Oh,
when really they are our leaders today. They're so courageous, they speak their truth, and they know what's happening on the ground, right? And as elected leaders, we have to listen, but not just listen. We also just need to get out of their way and let them lead too, right? So I mean that's a big thing too. And I always say this to folks, it's really the team that makes the candidate, right? I am just my thing at the end of the day, but I feel like the reason why I'm able to do what I can do and share this vision is because of all the young people that's part of the campaign team. I'm just incredibly blessed, right, to have amazing young folks around me that keeps me grounded, call me out when I'm not doing what I'm doing. And so they inspire me to continue this work, right? And those are the voters that continue to inspire me each and every day. So
why should older and seasoned people vote for you? I think I may be in the seasoned category.
I think intergenerational type of coalition and understanding is really important. So I also, in the Hmong culture, I lean heavily on our elders as well. And so, I think I shared this with you also, but before I announced my candidacy for city council, I actually went to the elders to ask for their blessings, right? Because for me, that's really important to let them know that I'm going to make this decision, because I also know that when I'm running, I'm not just the only one running. The community is running, young people my age, right, who support me is running, the elders who have really uplifted me and supported me, they're part of the campaign, right? So it's so important for me to go to them and ask for their blessings first. And I did that. I went to the elders. I did that for school board too, and that was a long conversation with the elders, because they're like, "You're a woman," because in the Hmong culture it's also very patriarchal as well. That's a whole nother conversation too. But I think for school board I did the same thing. I asked for their blessing. That's really important to me, to have our elders as part of the campaign, and also as also my kitchen cabinet, right? They're so wise. Oftentimes I think, elected officials or leaders, they go to folks with college degrees or PhDs, but our elders are wise beyond their years, right? And they're so knowledgeable. Whenever I'm in a tough situation and I'm trying to figure out, should I speak out on this, or how should I vote on this? It's not as black as white as you think it would be, right? I always, you know, speak to my grandpa of things that I can't share. If it's closed session stuff, obviously I don't share it, but like kind of giving him like the situation, or my grandma the situation, and be like, Grandma, what would you do? You know, like, what would you do if you're in this situation? And they would provide me answers. They don't have a PhD, right, in public policy or whatnot, but I go to them for advice all the time because their heart is pure, you know. At the end of the day, it's about doing what's right for our community. And I've always said this, like, whether we win or lose this campaign, if our focus is on improving outcomes for this community, and if our love is deep for this community, then it doesn't matter who wins, right? Because whoever wins, I'm going to be behind them, and I want to make sure that they're successful. And so, yeah, so we'll see. You know, we're going to work hard, but we got some strong candidates on the ballot as well.
So who are some of your endorsements?
Some of my endorsements. So I got, okay, I'm like trying assembly. I'm going through the list. So, well, actually, let me start by my first endorsement is my siblings and my family.
Okay.
I was gonna go with the elective. I'm like, who's right? My family. I'm gonna say,
Right.
yeah, it's important to have your family endorse you, right? That's important too. I would say neighborhood leaders like David Bain from Cabrillo, Mr. Barry Boyd, who's part of the neighborhood association in Meadowview, Estella Drake, Margarita Chavez. So these are the neighborhood folks. So, you know, I think for me, it's having key neighborhood folks supporting you because they know those neighborhoods better than anybody else, right? I also have, you know, a lot of young folks supporting me as well. I have teachers, local teachers who are supporting me. I have, and in terms of like, I have assembly member Kevin McCarty. I have Angelique Ashby, the only woman on the city council who's endorsed me. Council member Jeff Harris, Alan Warren. So I have 4 city council members have endorsed me. And then also like a long list of women, amazing women electeds like member Leticia Garcia, Karina Talamantes, Jacqueline Moreno, Zema Creason, just amazing Paula Villasquez. So just amazing women leaders who are blazing their own trails, right? And yeah, I mean, I have to look through my list, but there's a lot of folks on the list, you know.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
What is your website?
My website is, you can go to www.myvein.org. And on there you could learn more about how to join our team, how to get involved, a little bit about my history, my background. And also, I know today I talked a little bit about our platform in terms of neighborhood equity, youth investment, economic development, but I'll be rolling out our platform as well. So
I just shared your web.
Yay, awesome.
Your site. As we wrap this up, I wanted to ask you, do you feel like, I feel like with the city council that we need more feminine energy on that city council. I just, you know, I think men are equipped to do what they do, and that's great. But I do think we need more of a balance. I know we only have 1 woman on city council. Did that influence you at all to run?
You know, I think that's a concern that I have. I think we definitely need more representation. But I would say this, and it's the same question when someone asks me, like, you know, we don't have no Asian folks on the city council, right? Just like they said, there's only 1 woman on city council. While I think that those are issues, and like it's very prevalent, like it's at the forefront, people see that visually. Like my drive to run is not to be like the first Asian person, or like to have an Asian councilwoman, right? Or that we need to add more women, even though that's those are important to me, but I'm running really just to serve the community that I love so much. That's why I'm running, right? And I think those identity actually plays a role in terms of your perspective and what you bring to the table as well, right? So being a woman, being a daughter of immigrants, right? Refugees, right? Growing up in South Sacramento, growing up, you know, going through our public school, growing up on welfare, like living in the neighborhoods, like this is my experience that I bring, you know. And so I think, representation actually makes a difference. I'm very cognizant about, you know, the gender imbalance, very, very imbalanced, because Angelique is, Councilwoman Ashby is the only woman. I also see that, you know, I mean, we also don't have an API elected on the city council. So I know that I have to own that because I'm the API, because the API folks are like, well, you got to own that because you're API. You haven't mentioned that. I'm like, it's true. But I always say to people, like, I'm not running to be like the API elected. I'm not running to be, right? But I'm running to serve a community that I love so much, right? And I'm a if I get elected as I'm Councilwoman Mai, that is Hmong. I'm Councilwoman Mai, that is a woman, right? Like, I want people to see, like, my work ethic and, like, where I stand on issues, you know? I think that's important.
So somebody did ask me a question, because I thought I was going to be interviewing you today, and the question from them last night was, I guess they have a gentleman in Elk Grove's district who is now maybe the mayor of Elk Grove.
Oh, Steve Lee, yeah.
And the person said they had a concern that when people like him get on the council, that Elk Grove was pretty much Asian, you know, and she don't see where there has been room for other cultures. They feel like they don't want that to happen to Sacramento. I don't know how that can happen to Sacramento, but that was their concern.
Yeah, so what I will also say is that's why it's so important to, like, register to vote, organize, and mobilize communities, right? What I will also say about Mayor Steve Lee, he's probably the most progressive elected official on Elk Grove right now, right? Like, he was the one who was the sole person that was trying to fight for by-district voting, right? Where when all the other council members didn't want to fight for the by-district voting, everybody wanted to be vote at large, right? And that means, like, everybody in the city votes for each of the, you know, districts, right? When really, like, that dilutes voters, right? Because it's really about representing, right? So, you know, Mayor Steve Lee was a big champion of that. So I have to say, you know, props to him for being the most progressive on the dais in Elk Grove. But I'm also a strong supporter of Maureen Kraft, who I'm giving a shout out to her because she's going to be running for city council. I don't know, I think it's an open seat, and there are some heavy contenders in that race, but, you know, she has my support 100% because we need representation in Elk Grove. We know Elk Grove is incredibly diverse. I don't live in Elk Grove, I live in Meadowview, but, you know, because I did some campaign work there, I kind of know, like, I know the demographics there, and we need representation in Elk Grove, right? And so I'm 100% behind her, and I hope she takes it, and I'm going to do what I can to support her to make sure she wins. So
as we wrap this up, I want you to look straight into, and Maureen just gave you some thumbs up.
Oh, she is.
I want you I want you to look right to that camera and tell Sacramento and the surrounding areas why they should vote for you.
So, hi Sacramento, and I'm speaking to District 8 voters, and even if you're not a voter, right, I want to say to you that if I'm so honored to be elected by the voters, that I will be your advocate at City Hall. I will be that strong advocate that you need to fight for those resources to make sure that our families, our communities continue to thrive, right? We know for too long our communities have been overlooked, and I want to be that champion. I grew up in the neighborhood. I'm the oldest of 16, right? I've been doing this work, right? I've worked in City Hall for 4 years. You know, I have the governance background, the policy background, the community organizing background to really deliver, you know, results and also those opportunities. And so I'm really hoping that, you know, you will come out and vote in March during the primaries, right? And if you want to get involved with the campaign, please, you know, contact us. You can go to our website, www.mything.org, and get involved. We're super excited about the campaign and hope that, you know, we'll see you. I'm going to be knocking hard on doors, and hopefully I will see you and get an opportunity to speak with you one-on-one to really share our community vision for a better District 8. So thank you so much. And Ro, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Oh, no,
I really appreciate it.
This is, look, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Sorry.
No. Thank you for all the great hard work that you do in this community with our young Black women and our girls. I mean, it's people like you that's changing the community every day, right? Like, so, you know, I'm always going to lean in on you for your wisdom too. So
no, I thank you. I think I want to make sure the next time we get together, I want you to sit with the group of women and have
let's do that. Absolutely.
That's the next stage. So thank you all for tuning in to Earth Mama Live as we talk to Mai Bang, and I hope she gave you some great information. Please reach out to her and get information firsthand. She's very obtainable, family. Have a good evening. Peace.
Bye, everyone.